Imagine standing at the foot of Mount Everest in the 1920s, where a group of adventurous climbers dreams of reaching the top. Their first attempt in 1922 ends in failure, but hope lingers. Fast forward to May 29, 1953, when Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay finally make history by summiting Everest. They inspire many, including Jim Whittaker, the first American to reach the peak in 1963. Back then, only 24 climbers managed to conquer Everest, making it feel like an exclusive club reserved for the brave and skilled. For the average person, trying to climb Everest seemed as unlikely as traveling to the moon. But soon, everything would change. However, things changed in the 1990s. Mount Everest, once a remote and barren place, became a major source of income for Nepal and Tibet. These countries realized they could charge wealthy climbers for the chance to climb the tallest mountain in the world, and many were willing to pay. Experienced climbers like Rob Hall and Scott Fisher started their own guiding companies to help people reach the summit. This led to the tragic events of the 1996 Everest disaster, where both Hall and Fisher lost their lives. Surprisingly, this tragedy only increased interest in climbing Everest, partly because of John Krakauer's book, Into Thin Air. From Hillary and Norgay's achievement until 1989, a 36-year span, less than 300 people reached the summit. In contrast, in just the 1990s, 885 climbers made it to the top. This was just the beginning. Nepal earned tens of millions of dollars as thousands of climbers, many of whom weren't very experienced, paid a lot for a shot at reaching the summit. Throughout the 2000s, about 3,425 people summited Everest. As climbing seasons became busier, overcrowding became a concern. But Nepal and Tibet refused to limit the number of climbing permits sold because of the huge profits. By the 2010s, the situation was getting out of control. Every year, more climbers showed up, and as social media grew in popularity, sharing photos and stories online became very important. Climbing Everest became even more popular. By the mid-2010s, overcrowding hadn't yet led to a major disaster because climbers had several chances to make their summit attempt within an 8 to 11 day window. However, bad weather could easily lead to a disaster. In 2019, when about 800 people tried to reach the summit, the potential for disaster became a reality. The same number of climbers who had summited during the entire 1990s were now all trying to reach the top at the same time. Deaths on Everest often stem from altitude sickness, exhaustion, hypothermia, or devastating falls. Inexperienced climbers, especially those led by incompetent guides, find themselves in the gravest danger when things go awry, as tragically happened in 2019. By mid-April, hopeful climbers gathered at base camp, and everything appeared normal. A team of brave Sherpas, known as the Icefall Doctors, had meticulously prepared the route through the treacherous Khumbu Icefall, installing ladders over gaping crevasses and fixing ropes to guide climbers safely to Camp 2. But in early May, disaster struck when Cyclone Fani slammed into the Indian state of Odisha. Although it was over 500 miles away, the cyclone unleashed its fury on Everest, unleashing fierce winds and heavy snow that battered both sides of the mountain. This was just the beginning of a harrowing season filled with setbacks. Once the storm passed, a menacing jet stream settled over Everest, trapping climbers below 7,000 meters with winds exceeding 80 miles per hour. Climbers needed the winds to drop below 30 miles per hour to even think about summiting. As the first 3 weeks of May crawled by, the jet stream only relented long enough for a few strong climbers to make a bid for the summit. Sadly, not all who attempted it would return. Shay Lawless from Ireland and Ravi Thakur from India were the first to fall victim to Everest's merciless grasp during the 2019 season. As around 750 climbers anxiously waited for their turn to reach the summit, analysts hoped for a rare 9-day window from May 20th to the 30th, which would allow everyone to ascend without the nightmare of overcrowding. But as fate would have it, the forecast shifted, revealing that only a few clear days would be available, from May 22nd to the 24th, before the jet stream returned with deadly ferocity on the 25th. With such a narrow opportunity and the looming threat of being trapped high on the mountain as the jet stream returned, hundreds of climbers began preparing to set out for their summit attempts on the evening of May 21st. The resulting crush of climbers, many of whom were unprepared and inexperienced, led to a catastrophic scene. A massive line of climbers stood frozen in the death zone, consuming precious oxygen while barely moving. The death zone refers to heights above 8,000 meters, where survival is nearly impossible, even with supplemental oxygen. Those who linger too long in this grim realm risk losing vital brain and organ functions. Even if they manage to keep moving, their judgment deteriorates, leading to life-threatening accidents and deadly falls. Even the stronger climbers who managed to reach the summit on the morning of May 22nd faced a terrifying descent. A single safety line for each climber and a narrow path made every step a battle for survival. Those who had summited wanted to hurry down, desperate to escape the mountain's wrath, while those still climbing felt just as entitled to move forward, creating a deadly standoff. On the north side of the mountain, which usually offers solitude, around 150 climbers simultaneously surged toward the summit, causing horrific overcrowding. As climbers spent agonizing hours in the death zone, their bodies began to betray them. Most experienced climbers possess an extra gear, a determination to push through where the average person, merely chasing an Instagram photo, might falter. Professionals know how to conserve energy and keep moving, but the inexperienced drag their feet, slowing to a crawl or even stopping entirely. This created nightmarish traffic jams, leaving even the most skilled climbers trapped in a crowd of souls struggling against the mountain's icy grip, all desperate to survive. Most climbers eventually reached the summit of Mount Everest, but many met a tragic fate on their descent after spending a staggering 20 hours in the death zone. Typically, climbers spend around 10 to 12 hours there. This excessive time in the death zone was a major factor in the many deaths that occurred. One such climber was Donald Cash from Utah. He made it to the summit but fainted from altitude sickness shortly after, dying on Hillary's Step. His body was left on the mountain, a haunting reminder of Everest's dangers. An Indian climber named Nihal Bhagwan succumbed to exhaustion during his descent. Others faced dehydration and fatigue, caught in the terrifying traffic jam of climbers. On that fateful day, 3 more climbers perished on their way down. In total, 11 people died during the 2019 Everest season, with 9 succumbing to altitude sickness or exhaustion while descending. The last of all was Christopher John Coolish, a lawyer from Boulder, Colorado. After reaching the summit and joining the Elite 7 Summit Club, he tragically suffered a cardiac event on his way down. With so many climbers attempting to summit at the same time, many of them inexperienced, the death toll could have been even higher. Imagine a storm or avalanche striking just as hundreds of climbers were trapped in a massive traffic jam in the death zone. This area is aptly named. There isn't enough oxygen to support life above 24,000 feet. Each climbing permit costs around $11,000, creating a substantial cash flow for Nepal. However, the situation needs urgent regulation to prevent overcrowding and address the enormous trash problem littering the mountain. On the north side of Tibet, a limit of 300 climbing permits per year has been established, yet little else has been done to avert future disasters. The 2023 Everest climbing season is shaping up to be the deadliest yet, with 13 climbers and Sherpas confirmed dead and another 4 missing. Unsurprisingly, the number of climbing permits continues to set alarming records each year. Even marathons impose limits to avoid overcrowding, but Nepal has yet to implement similar measures for Everest, despite the clear risks. Rest in peace to all who lost their lives on Everest during the deadly 2019 climbing season. Not all those who died were inexperienced climbers. Many found themselves trapped in the death zone for far too long. Thank you for watching today's video about the haunting events of the 2019 Everest season. What do you think? Would you dare to climb Mount Everest? knowing you might get stuck in a terrifying traffic jam behind other climbers, many of whom are unprepared and ill-equipped to survive.